Okay. So blood groups kind of work, there's a nice way in which you can remember this, okay? If you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4 principle, okay, it works like this. One gene controls blood grouping. Okay, so you're going to look at blood grouping and you're going to have focused on blood grouping, and when geneticists are working out blood grouping, it's one gene that they look for. But the second part of this is that each person can only have two alleles at a time for blood grouping. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the different blood groups that we get in a moment. Okay, so each person can only have a maximum of 2 alleles. Then if we look at the third step, there are in fact 3 alleles for blood typing. Okay, and these are going to be the A, the B, and the O, which we are going to write a little differently when we start looking at the blood grouping, okay? And then the fourth one over here, okay, the fourth one that we're going to have a look at is that there are 4 possible blood groups in humans. Okay, so if you can kind of remember the 1, 2, 3, 4 little rhyme or scheme that we have over here. One gene controls blood grouping. Each person has 2 of the alleles that code for blood typing, okay, that are going to determine which blood group you have. But there are 3 alleles for blood typing, okay, A, B, and O, and there are 4 possible blood groups depending on the combinations of those blood types, okay, or of those alleles rather, that are going to result in the blood types. So the way in which we are going to look at this is blood group A can be written in one of 2 ways. You can either have a homozygous condition, which looks like that, or you can have a heterozygous condition, which is going to look like that. Okay, so here you have 2 of the same genes that are going to code for the phenotype, which is blood group A, okay? And here you have 1 dominant and 1 recessive gene, which is going to code for the same phenotype. Then if we look at blood group B, it's going to work in the same way. You can have a homozygous dominant condition where you have 2 of the same alleles coding for the blood type, or you can have 1 dominant and 1 recessive gene coding for it. Then if we have a look at blood group O, there is only one way to get blood group O, and that is to have both of those genes, okay, coded for. I'm going to explain to you in a moment why we only need to use a lowercase letter when writing this blood group. And then the 4th blood type that we get is blood group AB, which means you have 1 allele which codes for A, and you have 1 allele which codes for B. So if we come back to looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4 principle over here, the second thing says to us that each person has to have 2 alleles at a time. So even though the phenotype is written as A or a B or blood group O or blood group AB, what we can see is that in all 4 of those blood groups, there are 2 alleles each time. This is the dominant genotype, okay, or it's the genotype that codes by using 2 dominant genes. Okay, here is a genotype that looks slightly different. It has 1 dominant and 1 recessive gene. Okay, and what this tells us, if we look at it this way, is that A and B are dominant over the allele that codes for O, okay, and we can see that here you have 2 dominant genes together. Here you have a dominant and a single gene, but they code for the same phenotype. Blood group B works in the same way. Here you have two dominant genes, and remember, dominant genes are always written with a capital letter, and that is the reason why a lowercase letter, which in this case will code for the O allele, is going to be written in lowercase. You do not have to do that. Okay, it is not necessary to write the O, because we know that A and B are dominant over O, so that can only be written with a lowercase letter. So blood group O can only be found if both recessive genes are coded for together. But then there is a fourth blood grouping in humans, and that is where you have one allele coding for A, and you have the other allele coding for B, and it makes a separate and a fourth phenotype in the blood grouping. Okay, so each time we can see that there are two alleles for each blood type. And what we can see is that there are three alleles, though, that we use. And it's the combinations of these three alleles for blood typing that result in four possible blood types. So, if we look at the first two, another term that we have to know is that of complete dominance. Okay, and blood typing is very interesting because blood typing is an example of complete dominance as well as something else. When working with complete dominance, we have to know that A and B are dominant over O. Okay, so that is going to be a form of complete dominance. If you have an A and an O together, phenotypically, you're going to have blood type A. If you have a B and an O allele next to each other, B is dominant over O, so we are going to see in that person's phenotype, blood type B. So the only way to get blood type O is to have both recessive genes together. But then if we come back and we have a look at blood type AB, blood type AB has one of each of the dominant genes, okay, one of the dominant alleles, and it codes for a separate phenotype. This is an example of codominance. Okay, codominance. And that means that A and B are not dominant over each other. Okay, so complete dominance is going to be used when you are looking at the A and the B in relation to the recessive gene, which is the O gene. But codominance is going to be the principle that you have to use and keep in mind when doing a genetic cross, and if you get scenarios, okay? This is a fourth possible phenotype. So just linking again, another bit of work that is quite important.